Hello, welcome to the Flute 360 podcast, where we incorporate a panoramic view of flute-related topics. I am your host, Heidi K. Begay, and this is episode 90, an interview with Kathy Blocki, the creator of KinderFlute. Today's sponsor is brought to you by J&K Productions. Did you know that not only are they a production company for podcasts, but they are a recording company for musicians? Any musical recording needs that you may have, J&K Productions can fulfill that need. They have all the necessary equipment and expertise to record your next flute recording for college or graduate auditions, competitions, summer festivals, or a flute album. J&K Productions can record any setup imaginable, from solo flute, small chamber, flute and piano, and much more. Consider J&K Productions for your next recording project. Contact them at jkproductions.media. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Flute 360 podcast episode. Today, I have the wonderful Kathy Blocki, who wears many, many hats. But the hat we will discuss is the fact that she is the creator of KinderFlute. Welcome, Kathy.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be with you again.
Yeah. And for the listeners out there, Kathy just said again, we had an amazing conversation about 6 months ago, and we produced an episode together, which is episode 43. So for those who are interested in learning all about Kathy's Pneumo Pro, go check that out. So let's talk about China. You just got back from a very busy trip to China where you talked about your KinderFlute, correct?
Yes, I was at this huge show. It is called Music China, a little bit overwhelming, but we presented what KinderFlute is all about and had a video there showing some of the activities, and people were quite intrigued. The approach to teaching is quite different from what typically goes on in China, and the teachers were very excited. The music schools, they have huge music schools there in Shanghai and throughout China. So they were very excited to get started with KinderFlute.
Neat. So how is the learning or the educational system different in China compared to the States?
I think it's more of a traditional approach. So I think it would be much like the States, but when I have Chinese parents that take off me here, they say that in China it's much stricter. You do this, so it's not a fun experience. It's very strict for the young children, and this approach where you use a lot of games and you see the children's faces, they're just smiling and bright, and they hate to leave their lessons. So I think that's the difference.
Wow. I resonate with that. My dad was born and raised outside of Tokyo for 21 years. And he was a missionary son. But because, he's whiter than me. But with that Asian culture, I feel a lot of that mentality is how he raised the family. And so learning in the early stages of my life, it wasn't really fun. And I think that was one thing that drew me to education was when I realized how fun it could be and how I lit up when I learned something new. I wanted to pass that along to my students.
It's going to be a lot of fun in China teaching and training these teachers because you have a culture where they really value musical training. And you see these teachers so excited about learning these games. Initially, they asked, could you come for 2 months and stay? Well, that is not possible for me to do. But this spring, we'll start with several courses for teachers, and I'll probably be there 2 weeks.
Oh, wow. How interesting. And that's exciting for you that they have extended the invitation.
Yes, it is. It's very exciting.
Cool. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of your wonderful KinderFlute, Let's talk a little bit about you and your background for the listeners who may not know you.
Sure. So my teachers, I've had some amazing, amazing teachers many years ago. Bernie Goldberg was the first one, and I had the privilege of studying with him when I was in high school. He, at that time, was studying with Moïse in the summers, even though he seemed ancient to me back then, but he was probably in his 50s, and would go up in the summers, and he would go up to Vermont and play for Marcel Moïse, and they would be doing the 24 melodious studies. These adults, these famous flute players would be gathering, playing these pieces, and I had the privilege of studying them with him. I didn't realize what a treasure it was, and he made it so simple. So we spent a lot of time just on musicality and making a beautiful legato. And actually, he was a pretty fun teacher. He liked to, I think, I was one of his younger students, and he would dance around the room, and we really had a lovely time. I think with his older students at the Duquesne University, it wasn't quite so much fun, but we had a lovely time. And then I had lesson with Samuel Baird, who just a lovely person and very logical. He'd often have me analyze the music. And yeah, again, everything was so logical, and I learned so much from him. And then I studied with James Pellerite at Indiana University, and that was a completely different style. It was very strict, very intense, but I did learn a lot.
Yeah.
I learned an immense amount from what he had to offer.
Amazing. In reviewing for today's episode, I went back and listened to our episode 43. And that is and was the first question I asked you too, share your musical background. So I did it again because I was being a little selfish. I love hearing that rich history of yours. And so I just love hearing it. And it's like, I don't know, it's just diving into the past, and you can see all your teachers, and it's a treasure.
It is. I feel incredibly privileged with having the opportunity to study with who I've studied with.
Yeah, how neat. So let's talk about your KinderFlute. How did it get started? What inspired you to start it? And all of that wonderfulness.
Well, we moved to Pennsylvania. It was actually about 20 years ago. And prior to that, I was teaching at Goshen College. I had a very full studio. And when we moved, it was difficult to get a new studio, even though I'd been successful in the past. The students that I was getting were band students that weren't succeeding. And that was fine, but I felt like I was always correcting bad habits. So I had, well, let me go back a little bit. Dejao at one point had given me a mini, it wasn't called a mini D yet, just a mini flute. He said, I just did this for fun. And I played it. It was amazing. And I said, this isn't just for fun. This is a serious flute. This plays beautifully. And then I joked with him, you should call it the mini D. And that's how that name came about. So I had a friend of mine, she had a 4-year-old that was interested in music. And I said, well, why don't we experiment? And so I started teaching this 4-year-old, and it went very well. It went very smoothly, and I loved it. And at the same time, my daughter, who's disabled, was being denied gym class because she couldn't physically do what they were doing in class. And they and I was having to fight to say, well, she can't stand, so the only way she can accomplish these goals is in the water. And I was being denied that. So I was had done a dispute resolution with the school district, and I started studying a lot about brain development and neurogenesis. And I was just amazed that with the work by Dr. John Rady, he wrote the book Spark, and he's kind of the spark behind all this research of neurogenesis. Neurogenesis just being new brain cells being developed 20 years ago, they didn't think that this was possible.
Wow.
And it was just probably 18 years ago that this research really came to the forefront. He, with MRI, showed that neurogenesis was actually possible. Actually, new brain cells could be generated in the brain. So I'm not talking about new, I don't want to get too technical, synapses. And we know that just with repetition that we build new branches in the brain and new connections. But this is actual new brain cells. And the way, one of the most important ways of doing that is physical exercise and movement.
Wow.
He, in his book Spark, he documents using a group of students in Naperville, Illinois. Now, this is a fine school district, but they're 8th graders. They had them do 20 minutes of exercise before they took their math and science classes. And they had monitors, and the idea was to get their heart rate up to a certain sustained level. And once they had met that, then they were in their classes and learning. And what happens, he says, in the front part of the brain, it kind of, these different chemicals happen. And he calls it, to simplify it, miracle grow for the brain. So it kind of coats it with these chemicals, this miracle grow, so that you can learn a lot better. And you have this keen alertness. So these kids all took the International Science and Math test by the end of the year, and they did phenomenally against other countries that normally would be much higher than them. And typically when you take this test, like in Chicago, they may have administered this test, but they would have just taken the top 5 students from each of the schools and administered the test. And we still wouldn't do well compared to other countries. So this was just a phenomenal study they did. And they were also doing some MRI so they could see where things were lighting up in the brain. And since then, there's been a lot of research that has been done. And you can see that it's this man's work that it kind of has generated all this other research. So do you mind if I quote something from him?
Oh, I would love that.
He is a physiatrist from Harvard and a researcher. And let me just do this quote. I'll do it slowly. Physical exercise improves the fitness of the neocortex. So the neocortex is just that front part of your brain, which in turn improves mental agility and mood, as well as cognitive processes that require attention, alertness, and motivation. But not all physical activity is created equal, and some types are more effective than others at accomplishing specific goals. For the greatest intellectual benefit, aerobic exercise in combination with complex activity has been found to maximize brain power. So we take this concept and we alternate activities that have more aerobic activity to them with quiet activities of learning new things in the KinderFlute class. So you'll see the kids doing relay races. All kinds of movement where they really get going. Even the theory, we do, instead of the solfege, we use numbers. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And that's a foundation of learning scales. If you put 2 5-note patterns together, you get a full scale with a turnaround. But 5-note patterns are much easier for these kids to memorize. And just my thought, as I've seen these kids have better agility and facility in their technique than me, it's incredible what these kids can learn. I'm amazed that the Taffenal Gobert now begins with these 5-note patterns, because I thought, wow, if these kids really learn their 5-note patterns very, very well, their technique's going to be phenomenal. So now it makes sense. Why does these 17 daily exercise begin with this? It's because it's truly the foundation of phenomenal technique. But getting back to ear training, so as we're standing up, our toes are 1. So 1, and then our knees are 2, and then 3 is our waist, and then underneath our armpits 4, and then 5 is our shoulders. 4, 3, 2, 1. So there is a full body motion, and I might sing those numbers, and they're doing it and singing the notes, or I might just be making the movement and they're singing the notes. And that's how also we do transposition. And to make it extra fun, we add the parachute to that. So we're all doing it together. So all of a sudden this transposition and ear training has become a lot of fun. When you put a parachute in their hands, all of a sudden there's excitement. And if you're going a lot of 1-5, 1-5s, 1s, that's a lot of exercise.
Yeah, I so wish my RL Skills 101 class in college had a parachute in the course.
Yeah. When I was teaching at Goshen College, it was kind of crazy because they didn't have an RL Skills class there prior to me being there. And so it wasn't a separate class. So I developed that. And just like in Indiana University, we use numbers, and that translates easily to harmony. I decided to do that. And it worked so well for these kids. And of course, it's a movable dough. So that's a big difference from Dalcroze, is that it's movable dough. And I think these kids, they understand the function of the chords, and what a tonic is and what a dominant is. And it also lays the foundation for them to play in tune, because we emphasize just tuning. So if they know 1, 3, and 5, they know what part of the chord they are on. So when we do little ensembles, we're doing, I usually have the score in front of them so that they can see, what part of the chord they're on. And that 3 needs to be lower to create that beautiful difference tone. I think I'm a little far afield because that wouldn't be till about the 3rd year of KinderFlute. Okay. So I rambled a little bit there.
No, it's only because you are so passionate about your course and this field, and no rambling, all really good information. So yeah, there was an excerpt on YouTube where you are showcasing the KinderFlute class, and it was only 5 minutes long. But when you were talking about numbers, near the end of that 5-minute excerpt, I saw you guys doing a triad, 5-3-1. And you're singing those pitches. So I was relating to what you were saying with the numbers, and seeing it in correlation with the body.
Yes.
Yeah. That's really neat.
And it also makes transposing so much easier. I know when I was teaching in Belgium and I was showing how we do transposition and even a simple melody, the kids will write in the scale degrees and then be able to transpose that melody. They were really torn because they saw how easy it was for these kids to transpose and the understanding of theory. But they are very entrenched in fixed dough. So compromise sometimes, okay, you do the solfege because that's really kind of your note names. And you can also add the numbers and keep that movable dough. So I'm just a strong advocate of movable dough.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So because I'm not trained, like I don't have a music educator certificate, I'm curious with the body, going back to the numbers with the triad, because these kids are so young, by them touching their knees and then their waist and then their head, say that's 1, 3, 5, is it part of their development as a child to be aware of their body too?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So usually we're starting kids typically it's 5 and 6, so some of that body awareness is there, but reinforcing that is I believe really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, these children are very young, and I was a little jealous. I thought, oh man, I wish I would have had some kind of class like this when I was their age, before piano and before flute. Because I think a lot of just fundamental things like hearing pitch, singing it back, skipping or dancing to the beat, things like that, just very basic things that we carry into our professional musical career could have been such a better foundation, in my opinion. I could be wrong with this statement, but it seems like a better foundation than going right to piano.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And some of the children I teach have also had from 2 years old or even younger have had music classes, whether it be flute in music in motion or kinder music. There's several out there that are lovely experience-based music programs for the very young child.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned this earlier with Delcros. You said how your KinderFlute uses movable dough and Delcros uses fixed dough. Are there any other similarities or differences compared to the Delcros technique?
So I've been told that I'm very Delcrosian.
Okay.
Somebody used that term last year. You're very Delcrosian. Well, in the sense that we do so much movement, and I think Delcros, the rhythmic side, is just incredible, and their movement and filling up the space. So I try to encourage the kids to fill up the space, and as we move, we'll do a lot of things passing around the beat when we're sitting in a circle, and that is very Delcro. I don't know if it's from the Delcros. Mm-hmm. So we do use those principles. Some of them I've learned from watching some Delcros things, or some of the things we've just are just natural incorporating into what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Trying to always within a class, we try to always include at least one activity where they're actively learning to keep the beat.
Okay.
But whether it's with the parachute or we're sitting in the circle, and we're always trying to do at least one activity where we're working on breathing, some type of breathing game, and then some type of theory. The transposition might be as simple as using a book. We use Mortimer Be Quiet. It's a hilarious children's book about Mortimer who won't be quiet when he goes to bed. And all these kids can relate. And we've kind of co-opted the book a little bit where mom goes up the stairs. It's bum, 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 bum. So we take that stomp, 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 stomp to make it into a 5-note pattern. And so as we read the book, and then stomp, 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 then dad goes up, and then the policemen go up quietly, and then all 17 brothers and sisters, so they can all pick their own 5-note patterns to do together, and it sounds like chaos. And so, but taking that, a book like that, and whatever 5-note pattern we're doing, using that, anyways, they just making it a lot of fun.
Very cool. And you have another character in your class, Mr. Balloon.
Oh, yes. That's early on, because the children typically are just blowing their brains out. And if you can get they like to do the Pneumo Pro also. So letting the air out gradually and sustaining the air is a very important concept for them. So Mr. Balloon Man, we have a balloon, and they all have their own balloons. I just let it go and say that he has a problem. He lets all his air out at once. So we practice with the balloons gradually letting the air out. And then we try to do that on the flute to see who can hold their, whether it's a head joint or the full flute, who can hold their pitches the longest. Because we have a short note approach. There's a long note approach to teaching beginning instruments, wind instruments, and there's a short note approach. We do the short note approach, but that doesn't mean that we don't sustain notes. And that's a key factor of what we're doing. Many years ago when I started flute, I could still remember my book. It was, I'm sure it was well intended, but you held a note for 4 beats and then you rested for 4 beats. Well, even the most advanced players, rarely, if they don't have something underneath them, they do not fill in that beat with a subdivision and play it accurately. So a beginner playing, it cannot play that accurately. And 4 beats was an eternity for a beginner player. And then you're resting. Well, when did that rest begin? I don't know. So rhythmically, it didn't make much sense other than I was holding a note as long as I could and then taking a breath, basically. But a short note approach, we start with quarter notes and half notes so that you're able to count them, and all the children can count in 1 and 1, 2. So we're always using spiral teaching where we're building on what they already know. So they already know 1 and 1, 2. And again, when we clap that, the 1 is a little circle that we're clapping with, and then the 2 we clap and then make a circle as we hold the second beat so that it's not a dead beat 2. Again, trying to fill up the space. Yes, the rhythmic idea of KinderFlute is with a head joint, they begin learning all the patterns that they're going to play for the rest of their lives. But it's just based on quarter notes and half notes. It's kind of like a computer science where you've got the zeros and the ones. So we use those patterns, and then it systematically develops. And we're try really hard to develop that sense of hearing a division of the beat in their heads.
Yeah.
So it's very consistent throughout the years that they study. It's I think it's because the aspect of flute playing that I had the most difficulty was rhythm. Not that it was awful, but if you wanted to be an orchestral playing, it needs to be phenomenal. And Pellerite was incredible. James Pellerite, incredible with rhythm. His son became a drummer, or percussionist, I should say. So I think because I had difficulty, or I don't want to overstate it, with rhythm, I felt like I have given that a special attention in how to teach that so that it's very cohesive and systematic, and so that kids can learn to hear that division of the beat.
Yeah, definitely. So speaking about how students learn and your approach to it and all of that, when I was watching that 5-minute clip online, I noticed that so many different learning styles were incorporated in the lesson. So visual, oral, verbal, physical, logical, among others. Do you incorporate all of these different learning styles within the activities? Like, that seemed very intentional to me.
Yeah, so I think the younger the child, I think the more kinesthetic the activities should be. And so whenever you're doing movement, I think that just helps with the philosophies of Dr. John Rady, how to use that movement to learn, like note reading. So whether it be a relay race or we're doing a round robin type game, so they're learning to visually see the notes and the placement of them to learn that, but we're doing that through movement. So yes, we're trying to do it to incorporate as many of those aspects as possible.
Yeah, and it seems like, I'm sure you have, a student every now and then that has a hard time keeping his or her attention. But just watching them so engaged in the activities, it felt like to me like that would not be a problem. Like they were just so ecstatic about being there and like participating in the activities. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. So we use a principle that I gathered from the Institutes for Achievement of Human Potential, which is located outside of Philly. Years ago, they started teaching kids with disabilities. So like in the 60s, somebody with Down syndrome didn't go to school because they didn't think they could learn. Now we know much better now.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the history. If you go back, these people really worked with kids with disability, and they were so successful that they do it now with typical kids. And they have not that I'm advocating having to have a genius 5-year-old, but I think there are principles that work. I think are important. That the three things that I think are really important to take away from what they've done over the many years is when you're designing a lesson plan. There's duration, repetition, and intensity. Those three principles are important. So the younger the child, or the more difficulty they have with keeping their attention span, the shorter the duration.
Okay.
So you want to have activities that are maybe 4 minutes long, or even shorter if they're younger. And then you want to have lots of repetition. Say if you have a kindergarten class and you're teaching them the T sound, the T sound. So if a teacher sits down and does that for 20 minutes, maybe they'll learn it. If she's using, different ways to teach that within that 20 minutes. But if she would do that 10 times for 2 minutes, those kids are going to remember that so much better. So a lot of repetition. So if a student's just beginning their first lesson or a group lesson, what we want them to understand is that correct embouchure, how to use that Pneumo to get that air column down, how to form that correct embouchure using the mirror. So we will come back to that about 6 times during that hour group lesson or a half-hour private lesson. And each time will be shorter and shorter, but we keep on coming back to it. So it's repetition, duration, and intensity. Just think back whenever you were beginning to play and you got to play Jingle Bells. Did you practice Jingle Bells a lot more than you did with a pretty much no-name exercise? So the kids usually, if it's a piece they know already, it makes it exciting for them. They really want to practice. I've always found that when the kids get Christmas music, they're very excited and they practice more. Well, we'll use one of our pieces is Sneaky Cat, and da 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 da, and it repeats. Well, we have a Sneaky Cat weaving in and out between the kids with a parachute, and they're walking to the beat one way, and the other person's walking the other way. And when the music stops, they try to catch the cat and bringing the parachute down onto them. And so all of a sudden, Sneaky Cat has become. They just can't wait to practice it. Or we'll do a game with a piece that they're going to play. I'm sorry. So going back to that repetition, duration, and intensity. So that's intensity, just giving them the desire to want to do it and learn it and to have a keen alertness when they're learning something. So that would be the third component of that.
Very neat. Well, even as an adult, like if I'm on a T&G exercise for too long, or like number 1, 2, and 4 are standard, and getting through number 1 is fine because it only takes like 3 minutes or something. But if I'm focusing on something for too long, say a passage in Due to You, my attention span is only so long. And at some point, I have to pull myself away from, say, measures 1 through 20 because, one, I'm not learning anything new. And it's just this, I'm not focused and I'm not getting through the section. And do you see what I'm saying? Like, so if you're beating this horse over and over again,
yes.
The learning is cut off and you're just there. You're not actually engaged.
Absolutely. Even with my older students, I'll have them, if it's a difficult technical passage, we'll break them up into, we might number, these are the measures, these are usually a piece, it's often like 20 measures of the total sonata. Sometimes not, sometimes it's the whole piece, but we'll take something like Metronome Plus where they have that trainer where you can start slowly and it automatically increases the speed, and it times it to say you're only allowed to concentrate on this you play it for 1 minute, and then you have to go on something else, and then you come back so that you keep this keen awareness.
Yep. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's the only way I can practice. Yeah, so that's good that you are showing that to them at a young age.
Yes, I think we all need that. Also rewards if they practice, they either get their sticker or a little candy. And I know that if I have something difficult to learn, sometimes it's just not fun repeating and learning a technical passage. I also reward myself too. I have there, I know it's maybe juvenile, but it takes that sometimes.
No, can we say dark chocolate?
Yes, I know. So yummy dark chocolate, do it. Yeah.
I love it. Oh, shoot. Very cool. So when you are getting ready for your class and you are doing your lesson plans, do you have a guinea pig student that you try the activities out with before introducing it to the entire class?
I feel like the whole class is my guinea pig. And so we're always, whenever I try a new activity, I evaluate it and say, this worked or this did not work, and tweak it. So I feel like, and this is so interesting with my teachers that we've trained, I feel like their creativity just skyrockets. We have the teachers who are trained, we have a private Facebook page where we're sharing ideas of what we did and are doing and games we're developing. It's just the creative process just blooms. We're having fun, and you love to see the kids having fun. So I feel like I'm always coming up with new ideas, and they have to go through a process. Again, you have to think what worked with this and what has not worked, and how can I tweak it to make it better. Yeah. And sometimes until you do it. Go ahead.
Oh, I think that's what makes you such a great educator, is because one of the adjectives I like to describe good educators is curiosity. And I find that, just even hearing you say like, oh, you have to tweak it and see what works, what doesn't work. And to me, that's just screaming out curiosity. You have to be curious as an educator and constantly changing and figuring out what is useful and what is beneficial or what is not beneficial for your students.
Yes, absolutely. And then when in the private lesson, I really feel like you have to become a student of your student to understand what works for them, what makes them tick, and what makes learning, what style is most effective for them.
I love it. Amazing. So if there is a flutist and or teacher right now who is listening, and he or she is inspired by this approach, how does one go about your teacher training program, and how can they become certified?
Well, we'll have our next class in next July, the second week of July. the class is limited. So if they're interested, I would get on and register quickly. So we only have one in the States.
Okay.
They can also come to China or Thailand. But
Nice.
But the second week of July is when it's going to be, and it's going to be in Pittsburgh. Often people ask me, can I just do it online? Can you watch online? But it's very participatory. Mm-hmm. And then watching the kids actually in action. We do intro classes. We teach teachers how to do intro classes so that they can get their first group of classes. So we do marketing, how to get that first class going. But yes, so they can sign up and go to KinderFlute or the Blocki Flute website and get signed up. After they take the class, there's requirements they need to fulfill to become a certified teacher. Just some basics. It's meant to get them started. First of all, they need to teach some intro classes, and that is meant to get them going on getting their first class together. And they have to videotape one of those classes so that I can watch it and help give some good criticism and critique to make sure they're implementing the ideas of KinderFlute, that you're not spending 20 minutes on one activity, something like that. Mm-hmm. And you're using all the activities and organizing the class the way it needs to be organized. And then understanding embouchure, we also do, our method is different, is that we start with multiple octaves on the head joint and the flute. So these kids, it's very Moisian that these young kids very easily play pretty much the full range of the flute through harmonics. We have 100 variations on what we call harmonics. It might be helicopter drops or jumping jacks, or just many different things that we call the harmonics exercises, always trying to come up with a new idea to call it. 1,000 variations on doing your harmonics.
Wow. I want to be, when I come back to the States, I'm in Greece right now, but when I come back to the States, I would love to participate in this teacher training program. But more importantly, I want to be a student in the class. It just sounds like so much fun, and it's engaging. And seriously, these kids, their faces were like lit up on the screen when I watched your class online. It was just like, I don't know, it was candy to them.
Well, the teachers also, we have a great time because the teachers do the activities, the pursuit activities and the games, because that's how you remember the best.
Okay. Is
actually doing them. And so, yes, so the joy among the teachers is there also. I think just taking the class, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. It's candy to them too, or dark chocolate too.
That's right. That's right.
Full circle. Oh, shoot. Are there any KinderFlute announcements that we have not mentioned thus far?
No, I think you've done a great job.
Okay. Oh, thank you. So in the last segment of the show, we do a portion called Picks. What is your pick today, Kathy?
Oh, well, I have found this great TV show. I don't watch much TV, but there's this great show. It's called The Good Doctor. And again, I guess with my my love for helping the disabled also, this guy is autistic, this doctor, and just what he goes through to be, not to become a doctor, to just be successful in his field. And it's so insightful. It's just a fantastic show.
Yeah, I heard really good reviews about the show.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah.
Cool.
And what pick do you have?
Oh, yeah. Thanks for asking. So since we're talking about the body and movement, my experience with that was a class I took for my DMA program with Dr. Luke Vanier, and he is a certified Alexander Technique teacher. And so I took a class with him and learned so much with him and his wife. And so, of course, we dove into the literature, and one of the books is my pick for today. And it's titled How to Learn the Alexander Technique, a Manual for Students by Barbara Conable. So I recommend that book highly.
Oh, I need to get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they, different versions like the traditional paperback, but you can also, I think, get Kindle, so you can get it electronically on your tablet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, Kathy, on a personal note, I just want to say thank you so much, one, for your time, again, for this episode, in addition to episode 43. But second, it did not hit me until just now that when we met at NFA in Salt Lake City a couple months ago, that technically was our first physical meet and greet, but it didn't feel like that because of our episode 43 conversation. So I apologize that I did not say, "Oh my gosh, Kathy." Like it didn't hit me. It just felt like I've always known you, and that's how comfortable you make people feel. So I just want to put that out there.
Well, likewise, I felt like I had known you already. So
yeah, you were so sweet.
Well, it's always lovely to meet people in person, but you do feel like after spending time together talking, you feel like you do know. You do know a person. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just crazy because I don't know if I'm tired or what it was, but when we were, I won't mention the company's name, but when we were standing in the exhibitor slot for this company, you were so gracious to introduce me to the owner and, doing business and talking about this series 19, Flute and Movement. And for me, I was just like, oh yeah, it's Kathy Blocki. Like we've talked, but then it just dawned on me now, wait a second, that was the first time you actually got to meet Kathy. And so I just feel like a total doofus right now.
Oh,
the reason why I brought all that up too is because thank you so much for your generous bronze sponsorship for this series. I really wholeheartedly appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. I just love what you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot to me. Well, you are still recouping from China, and I will be talking with you and the rest of the ladies on Sunday. So I will talk to you then. And thank you again for your time, energy, and talents. And I am sure that this is not going to be the end of Kathy Blocki being interviewed through and for Flute 360.
Well, thank you, Heidi. It's a pleasure to be meeting with you again.
Yeah, same here. You take care, Kathy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Do you love seeing children excited about learning music and playing the flute? KinderFlute classes are carefully designed to create a love of learning. During the teacher training classes, flute teachers learn how to integrate games and movement into their classes to both motivate and maximize learning potential. The movement activities and games are foundational to helping the students maintain a keen sense of alertness. Not only does KinderFlute motivate students, but also the teacher training classes has energized and transformed many studios. The ideas from the teacher training classes can be applied to students from ages 4 through 12. The next U.S. training class will be this summer, July 8th through the 11th, but it's not too early to sign up. The available spaces are limited, so it's best to sign up as early as possible. They will be held just north of Pittsburgh, and the housing is at the beautiful Eden Hall at Chatham University. Thank you for listening to the Flute 360 podcast. For more information, please visit HeidiKBegay.com. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review in the iTunes store. Let's talk about flute.